This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you. Let me call the meeting to order. In accordance with Governor Pritzker's disaster proclamation, this meeting will be held virtually. People wishing to make public comment are encouraged to submit written comments via email by 5 p.m. the day of the meeting. Can I have a roll call, please? Deputy Clerk Gravetti.
Mayor Brummel,
Here.
Alderman Anderson,
Here.
Alderman Ashauer,
Here.
Alderman Berry,
Here.
Alderman Davalos,
Here.
Alderman Goodman,
Here.
Alderman Krischel,
Here.
Alderman Wagner,
He'll be joining in a minute.
All right,
Alderman
we'll give him some time.
Alderman Wilson here.
thank you. City Administrator Coakley,
Here.
Assistant City Administrator White,
Here.
Finance Director Dahlstrand,
Here.
Police Chief Toronto,
Here.
Public Works Director Kukla, Community and Economic Development,
Not today.
Treasurer Brenner,
Here.
Clerk Larson,
Here.
Deputy Clerk Gravetti.
All right, will those who are able stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Those of you at home can say it with me silently. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now is the time that we set aside for citizens' comments. Is there anyone present in person who wishes to make a public comment?
You have Bob Siebert who's coming up to the podium now.
All right, Mr. Siebert.
Bob Siebert, Albright Court. On February 4th, the Plan Commission voted to continue the public hearing for 28301 Ferry Road, Vintage Luxury Homes, to March 18th. However, on March 18th, Chairman Cosgrove stated that it was a new public hearing. Apparently, the petitioner was confused because he asked if this was a new public hearing or a continued public hearing. Again, Chairman Cosgrove stated that it was a new public hearing. I am also confused and request a written response as to the public hearing. Was it a new public hearing or was it a continued public hearing as voted on February 4th?
Thank you, Mr. Siebert. Is there anyone else who wishes to make public comment?
No.
All right, do we have any public comments that have been submitted by email?
There were not.
Thank you. And if there's anyone who has called in who wishes to make a public comment, please state your name. And when everyone has stated their name, I'll call on you one at a time if there's anyone on the line. All right, I don't hear anyone. This will be the last chance at this meeting for a public comment. All right, let's go to officials and staff comments, and we will start with the mayor.
Thank you. I have nothing to add at this point.
Thank you. Alderman Anderson.
just want to say happy spring to everyone and excited to see the new banners out and about. Just kind of makes you feel like, hey, we've entered that new season. So encouraging to see. Thank you to the team that put those up.
Thank you. Alderman Ashour.
No comment, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Berry.
I have no comment, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Davalos.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say one thing. We have some letters of gratitude and sort of commendation for some of our police officers, not only for incidents in Warrenville, but for being called to the aid of other communities. And as I'm reading through this, I think they bring a lot. They don't just show up. I think they come with a lot of expertise because that's sort of in the notes and the letters. And so I just want to say how proud I am of these officers. I always am, but I continue to there continues to be times when it just goes on and on. So I just wanted to give a big thank you to our police officers and the chief. We really do make a difference, not just here in Warrenville, but in DuPage County. Thank you.
Thank you. I will make a public comment, just a official comment, just to say that today the early voting sites opened locally. You can now vote here in Warrenville at the Courtyard Banquets. So please make a plan and vote between now and April 6th. Alderman Krischel.
No comments this evening, thank you.
And Alderman Widener.
I apologize for being a few minutes late. I have nothing else to add. Thank you.
Thank you. And Alderman Wilson.
No comments, thank you.
All right, that's fine. If there's any staff member who wishes to make a comment or other elected officials, please speak up. Okay, hearing none, we'll conclude our officials and staff comments, and we'll move on to the business of the meeting. Item F1 is the consideration of adjustment to milestone payments scheduled for the Mesa Global ERP implementation. And I guess we will begin with either Christina White or Finance Director Dahlstrand. I've got both of them down.
I'll start, and Finance Director Dahlstrand will also supplement and add additional information that I may leave out. So for those that may have not been on the council or present when over the last few years as we talked about the Enterprise Resource Planning project, this project has been ongoing for several years. We are going to start with a very brief presentation just to cover some of the updates and where we are with the project, and then we'll talk more specifically about the milestone payment schedule as it's all related. So first off is how did we get here? Our current financial software is called MSI. It is a fairly limited software we've been using for about 20 to 25 years, and I'm sure Kevin will correct anything I say with related to MSI, but it basically handles all of our accounts payable, accounts receivable, utility billing, and basic payroll functions, and has been doing that for some time. We entered into or started a request for proposals to look at new enterprise software for citywide for finance, accounting, HR, and some other community development and public works pieces, which led us to the selection of Dynamics 365, which is a Microsoft product, through the implementation team of Mesa Global out of Park Ridge. We have had some challenges with the project, as some of you might recall we've talked about in the past. Some of that was Mesa's limited experience with local government in general. They had some project staff turnover over time, and especially in the beginning parts of the project, the first year and a half or so. And then Microsoft made some changes to the Dynamics 365 system or software, including they decided no longer to offer the payroll piece of that, which was a significant change and probably one that created about a year's worth of delay in trying to find a new payroll option, which we'll talk a little bit more about as we get further into the presentation. One of the other changes is the talent management component that was initially offered as part of the project. Microsoft also decided to stop using that, and they partnered with LinkedIn to do some of their recruiting and talent management. Some additional challenges, the limited city resources. We have a small staff trying to accomplish all of the day-to-day tasks and other projects like COVID that came out of nowhere, which isn't really a project, but certainly was a surprise, trying to deal with all of those things, as well as running through the limited or the ongoing ERP project, and all of the factors and parts of that project required a lot of staff time and has required a lot of staff time over the last few years. Our expectations of the project, no one on staff had gone through an implementation with this kind of a project at this scale before, so we had limited knowledge of what we were getting ourselves into. And initially, with the milestone payments that were established in the contract, it was very much based on the project plan that Mesa developed and presented to us as part of the RFP process. It was driven by phases of the project that they had outlined, rather than what I would say is our outcome basis, which is what we're moving towards now and recommending tonight. Outcomes meaning that we're actually going live and we're reaching the end, a successful conclusion from the city's perspective of getting the project up and running and being able to use the different pieces of the project. Our completion date right now is April 30th. We are finally getting to a point where we're wrapping up all of the final pieces of this. There's an asterisk there because we still think we're going to be probably doing some final testing and training after April 30th, but the majority of the design and functional development from a technical standpoint should be done by that point in time, and we should be very close to being able to go live with every remaining piece of the project. So here's a list of some of the things that have been completed so far. General ledger, which is essentially the framework of the accounting and all of the accounts that the city has in the funds. Accounts payable, which is all of the bill paying function, allows the city to pay our vendors and all of the people that invoice us for services. Basic human resources, which is essentially employee profiles and employee information management. Payroll, purchasing, and then Mesa cashiering. All three of these have an asterisk next to them because there's a little bit of additional complexity. The payroll piece, as we talked about, we ended up having to find another company to process payroll. The city ended up choosing ADP to do that because of a pre-existing integration that existed between them and Dynamics 365. All of the employee information and all of the details about the employee profile, the salary and benefit information is still living within Dynamics 365 as the system of record, but the actual processing of the payroll and issuing of the checks is happening through ADP. Purchasing went live about a year ago, but there are some additional training things that we need to do with staff and also some policy development that will change how we process purchasing and receipts now. We don't typically use purchase orders as a current practice, but that'll be a part of the new purchasing system in D365, which requires some change management and discussion and training internally. So while it is live, it's not fully in use yet. And then Mesa cashiering is ready to go live. There's one last software update, but it's been tested and trained on. And we're very close to flipping the switch, and that allows us to collect payments at the register. We'll be starting with the finance counter, and then police will go live with the cashiering piece once we have the rest of Mesa City implemented at the end of April. Some of the additional ongoing pieces is the projects and grants management, utility billing, which was not originally part of the project but was added on about a third of the way through. And then Mesa City, which is essentially the community development and public works pieces of the project, as well as the public facing portal. Finally, in the milestone payment schedule that was in the packet, there are some components or sections that are highlighted in a kind of an orange color. Those items are listed as to be determined. They are benefits, performance, and talent under the human resources piece, and under Mesa City, inventory, planning and zoning, rental registration, and inspections. The reason that these are highlighted and listed under to be determined is that at one point, as we realized we were coming to a time when we needed to wrap up the project because other priorities and other things happening in the background that had to be set aside while the ERP was being implemented, we realized that there were some items that were less critical to the overall success of the project and decided to put those aside and essentially determine if we could pick them up towards the end, or if there was time to do them, we would pick them up later. At this point, we're not sure that we're going to be able to actually implement these items, and they may not get completed with the project. The city will have to make a determination as to whether we continue these at a later time or just leave them out completely from the project. So the benefits piece is really an integration with a third-party system that didn't have the desired outcome of fully integrating. It would require some manual interference. The performance piece is really just managing our employee evaluations inside of the system, not actually providing the performance evaluations to the employees, but managing the background process. And then the talent management piece, as we talked about midway through the project, Microsoft decided they were no longer going to offer a talent management piece because they were partnering with LinkedIn. We have looked at what the LinkedIn option offers, but there's an additional cost to that, and city staff just doesn't think it really meets our needs. And then on the Mesa City side, inventory planning and zoning, rental registration inspections, these are all processes that somewhat are complex and are handled well outside of the system today. What the software would allow us to do is really track the employee actions, if you will, as part of these processes. And again, these were determined to be less critical than the other pieces of the project that we wanted to focus our attention on. So with that, I will answer any questions. And actually, before I take questions, Kevin, did you have anything to add that I missed?
Not so far. You know what? I will mention one thing. The purchasing was partially held up because of problems making the interfund accounting work correctly. We had to make sure that that worked so that when anybody were to make a purchase, it would get accounted for in the right fund and in the right order. And there was a long period of time where that did not work correctly. And while purchasing, the functioning of it worked, the accounting behind it did not work. So that was another reason for the delay in that as well. In addition to what Christina said about the training we still need to do and those kinds of things. So I thought that was important to note.
Thank you, Kevin.
Let's go through and see if there are any questions then. We'll start with Alderman Anderson.
Administrator White, I'm wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit about the schedule that you gave us in the back. And so I think you highlighted in salmon, at least that's how mine printed out, ones that you may not do, and therefore we would not spend the $25,000 that's there. Am I interpreting that correctly?
In part. So there is some discussion with Mesa ongoing about some of the elements that are highlighted. That integration piece with Benefit Solver, they did a lot of work on their end to make that work and to draft all of the reporting and configure sort of some of the technical aspects to make that work. And then it just turned out to not reach the outcome that the city was hoping for. So we are discussing with them that $25,000. The rest of the items that have not been accomplished or really started, yes, would come off of the total. And there's a couple ways we can handle that. There will likely be an ongoing support agreement with Mesa, just given the details and the extent of the Dynamics 365 software. There are things on the background when Microsoft applies a change across the system, or there's some configuration that needs to happen that the city doesn't have the technical staff to handle those sorts of things. So we will need an ongoing support arrangement with a company that works with Microsoft to do some of those types of changes. And so it's likely that some of those pieces will be moved to support and to cover some of those ongoing support costs.
Gotcha. No, I guess no additional comment. I think I understand where we are right now. I think it's just important that we get what we have projected to go live, have that go live and go live well. And I assume we'll come and revisit some of these other things in the future, but I suspect we've got another 6 months to a year worth of dampening in to getting the system really working the way that you want it to. So just making sure we have the resources that we need to have that ongoing care and maintenance to occur. That's all I have.
Thank you. Alderman Ashour, any questions?
No questions.
Alderman Berry, any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Davalos.
Yes, I just want to clarify so that I make sure I understand this. On the back page of the chart that you're talking about, where it says Mesa City in the orange and it talks about inventory, planning, zoning, petition, management, rental, registration, inspection. Who's going to determine that? I mean, some of these things seem important to me. I can see why on the other side, maybe we'd be okay if we didn't necessarily get some of that stuff. But this sort of seems important, and I don't know what system we'd use. Can you just talk about that those four boxes there? What's the future of that, do you think? I mean, it's attached to money, so I'm assuming that's important.
Yeah, so at this point, Mazik is still feeling confident that they can deliver some of these items before the deadline. And I should say that the April 30th deadline has been self-imposed by staff because we do need to bring this project to a close so that we can reshift focus on things that have been put aside for the last 2.5, 3 years while we've been working through this. That's not to say we may not decide at a later time to revisit some of the items that are not able to be accomplished now. But we do need to have a pause, if you will, and have some time to evaluate how is the system working, what's working well, where are the gaps still that need to be addressed, and then determine if we need to bring these pieces back, should we bring them back? And that will be a discussion that occurs at the council level to make sure that we're all on the same page. As far as what these, of course, these are all important pieces, but really what these Mazik City pieces are handling is the back end process of how staff tracks the information. So we'll continue to review planning and zoning petitions and go through the process, but so much of that process is very complex, and depending on the project and what they're looking at, there isn't a clean formula or a path that is, if you will, they're sort of divergent paths. So a lot of the discussion that we had around planning and zoning petitions specifically had to do with, is there a way that you can configure a system to really manage that process, or are you going to be trying to over-engineer software to manage a process that it has too many moving pieces and too many complications to really manage. So that's some of the discussion that happened at the staff level, and we'll continue to have that review and discussion. At this point, it really is a focus on getting the front-facing resident portal, the utility billing releases, and the remaining Mazik City pieces done and completed well and implemented well and successfully. That's really the focus right now, and getting to an end result that we're sufficiently comfortable with and that is working the way that it needs to.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. But we still have old software. I mean, we're not doing this by paper and pencil, are we? I mean, we still have stuff left in the system that may not be Mazik City, but that is going to cover whatever we're doing now will continue in the same fashion.
To some degree. So yeah, the planning and zoning petitions right now, and I don't want to speak out of turn, and unfortunately community development staff is not here. I don't think they're using any software to manage that process now. I think the entire process is managed sort of manually. That doesn't mean they don't have software tools to help them with certain parts of the process, but the process itself isn't being managed through software currently. So that is something that we'll continue to evaluate, but their biggest priority in community development was getting something in place for permit and permit tracking and permit activity, which does tend to follow a cleaner formula, if you will, from start to finish.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I would just say how much I really appreciate getting this update. I think this makes it much more clear what's been going on and where everything stands. My question has already been pretty much asked by Alderman Anderson, so I will say no more. Alderman Kurschel.
Thanks. I noticed that the next pieces are going to be released here in another what, 8 days? So next week sometime. How confident are we? I mean, obviously we haven't had anything released for quite a while. Are we at like final UAT testing? Are we confident we're going to have these two pieces moving forward at that time?
So Kevin, I'm going to ask you to talk about the Mazik City Release 1 and 2 because you've been more heavily involved with that. I just want to make a note on the citizen portal piece. We have gone through some testing. We've done some training on it. I know it says that we are releasing it March 30th, but it is going to be a soft release because staff wants to go through and test it a little bit more in detail and then talk about an implementation plan to get it out to the public and be able to inform everyone on how it's going to be used in the public rather than just releasing it and sort of having a free for all. So I wanted to make that note. But Kevin, can you talk about the Mazik City 1 and 2 releases?
I can. So just Friday of last week, we went with a soft go live, which would be on the second piece of that. So where it says releases 1 and 2 for permits, licenses, and other. That went live on Friday. It is a soft go live in that staff is now working within the system, beginning to input data in there, continuing to verify the data that's in there already, and has actually started to do a little input of new permits and new applications in there as well. So we're not quite 100% hard live, but we're live, and that staff is actually doing things in there now. So that's been a big step within the last week and a half or so.
Okay, great. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Widener.
I don't have any further questions or comments. Thanks.
Thanks. Alderman Wilson.
I have a question about the employee performance management. Can you tell me what that is relative to the whole package? Because under Matrix City, you have public works, work order, preventative maintenance management. What's the difference and what are we talking about here?
So the employee performance management is really the evaluation process. So annually we evaluate pretty much all city employees. And right now that is a paper form and a very manual paper process. And there is no system in place to track that information. It's all just stored and saved in essentially in paper or PDF format. So the employee performance management piece of the Dynamics 365 project is a way to evaluate employees annually, but also track performance criteria and goals throughout the year and add in notes and information. And it's essentially a way to keep track of all of that in one place electronically versus in a manual paper process or files or different places. And that is different from the work orders, which are more intended to notify staff in the Public Works Department when there is a call for service or something that needs to be accomplished. That will help them track the time and materials that they use and also track what work was done and where and for what reason.
Okay, because I thought there was something in the works for that to try to determine, we used to call them T&M, time and maintenance, time and material. Figures on how much it costs to do a job. How many man hours does it take to do the various jobs in public works? But okay, we'll look forward to getting a definition on or split definition on those. So thank you.
And what you described is part of the work order process. It will help us track the number of employees that were out on a work order for how much time and what kind of materials they used. So that is all part of what we're trying to accomplish with the work orders.
Okay, thank you for that additional comment there, because we're talking to also adding some personnel to Public Works over the next 2 or 3 years. So all of these things would tie together and give us more information. So the more information we have, the better decisions I'm sure we'll be able to make. So thank you very much for that clarification.
Thank you, Alderman Wilson. Would anyone like to make the motion?
Alderman Davalos, I would like to move to recommend the City Council approve the revised milestone payment schedule for Mesa Global implementation work on the Enterprise Resource Planning ERP project.
Second, Alderman Crucial.
Motion by Alderman Davalos, second by Alderman Crucial. Can I have a roll call, please, clerk?
Apologize for the delay. Alderman Berry,
Aye.
Alderman Widener,
Aye.
Alderman Crucial,
Aye.
Alderman Wilson,
Aye.
Alderman Ashaw,
Aye.
Alderman Goodman,
Aye.
Alderman Anderson,
Aye.
Alderman Davalos.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 2, the consideration of an adjustment to the starting pay for part-time public works seasonal workers. Again, we'll go to Assistant City Administrator White.
Thank you. So annually, the city hires at least generally 2 public works seasonal employees, sometimes 1 depending on the amount of projects and tasks, but they assist public works staff with some of the spring and summer and early fall activities. Usually there are, when we're not in COVID time, there's usually events and other efforts that occur during those months of the year. So those seasonal laborers allow us to get all of those things, all of those tasks accomplished, extra work accomplished. And their starting hourly rate has been $11. Because of the Illinois Minimum Wage Act changes, the minimum wage will increase to $15 an hour beginning January 1st, 2025. And there is an incremental increase that occurs every year on January 1st moving forward. So staff is recommending that we increase the starting hourly rate of pay to $13 for this year so that we can begin recruiting efforts for those positions. And then also we are recommending in the staff memo some incremental increases year over year. So the action that the city staff is looking from the city council to approve is an increase to the starting hourly rate for $13 effective April 5th. And then to direct staff to include those rate increases that are outlined in my memo from March 17th in the upcoming proposed budgets. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. That seems very straightforward, but obviously if there are any questions, please feel free. We'll start with Alderman Anderson.
No questions.
Thank you. Alderman Ashour.
No questions.
Thanks. Alderman Berry.
No questions.
Thanks. Alderman Davalos.
No questions.
Thanks. I have nothing. Alderman Crucial.
No questions.
Alderman Widener.
No questions. Thank you.
Thanks. Alderman Wilson.
No questions.
Thank you. Would anyone like to make the motion?
Alderman Davalos, I would move to recommend City Council approve an increase to the starting hourly rate for the Public Works seasonal labor position to $13 effective April 5th, 2021, and direct staff to include the rate increases outlined in staff's March 17th, 2021 memorandum in upcoming proposed budgets.
Alderman Widener seconds. Oh.
Second by Alderman Widener. We have a motion by Alderman Davalos, second by Alderman Widener. And the roll call, please.
Alderman Crucial,
Aye.
Alderman Wilson,
Aye.
Alderman Anderson,
Aye.
Alderman Berry,
Aye.
Alderman Goodman,
Aye.
Alderman Davalos,
Aye.
Alderman Widener,
Aye.
Alderman Ashaw.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We will move on to item number 3, which is the fiscal year 2022 budget discussion. This is an informational only item, but we want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to ask additional questions. So we'll start with the city administrator on this if you have any updates.
Thank you. I do not have any updates tonight. We did have one budget meeting with Alderman Goodman. Just went over some things in general. There wasn't really anything to report out. It was just discussing items there. If anyone else still is interested, I did hear another alderman may follow up with us. Please do so. We're happy to answer questions. You can call or email. You don't have to have a whole appointment, but you certainly can still if you wish. We can find time all the way up till the budget is adopted on, I think it's April 16th. It's the third Monday in April. But if there's other questions, or I also ask if Kevin has anything to add to this discussion at this time.
I do not have anything to add, but that would be April 19th.
Thank you. Always correcting me with the numbers. Thank you.
That's what he's so good at. All right. Thank you. We'll just go through the list once if there are any comments or questions. Alderman Anderson.
No comments or questions.
Alderman Ashour.
No questions, thank you.
Alderman Berry.
No comments, no questions.
Alderman Davalos.
No comments, no questions either. Thank you.
And I just want to thank the finance director and the city administrator for meeting with me and being so thorough. Alderman Krischel.
Nothing for me.
Alderman Widener.
No questions, thank you.
Alderman Wilson.
No comments.
All right. Item 4 is our informational updates on the Administration, Finance, and Police Department fiscal year 2021 work plans and decision packages left over from the fiscal year that we're still working on. If there are any comments or questions on that, we'll go through once more, starting with Alderman Anderson.
No questions.
Thank you. Alderman Ashour.
No questions.
Thank you. Alderman Berry.
I have nothing, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Davalos.
No questions tonight. Thank you.
I have nothing. Alderman Krischel.
No questions, thanks.
Thank you. Alderman Widener.
I have no questions, thank you.
Thanks. Alderman Wilson.
Do we have a date set yet for consulting the contracts with the police department?
Chief, are you the one to ask about that?
If you're talking about the collective bargaining agreements, I would defer that to Assistant Administrator White.
Assistant City Administrator.
I think the question was, do we have an expected completion date? Is that correct?
No. Do we have a date to meet? It seems to me that we haven't been able to get together to meet yet. That's my only question.
Thank you. We have started meeting with the MAP 214 unit, which is the sergeant's group. We've had 2 meetings already and have a 3rd scheduled. We have not yet had any meetings with the MAP 213 unit, which is the officers group.
Thank you for the update. I appreciate that.
All right. Again, this is an informational only item. We'll move to G1, commendations. Chief, would you like to say anything about those?
Yeah, if you noticed, and Alderman Davalos highlighted this, but before I get into that, I did send out an email this afternoon to the elected officials. This was with regard to a question that was brought up regarding the reimbursement of the initial tuition for the Suburban Law Enforcement Academy, tuition for our new police recruits that go through that. I did talk to Director Volpe of the Suburban Law Enforcement Academy. This was enacted in early of 2020, and the last 2 recruits that we had were Officer Makuris and Officer oh gee, I'm trying to think right now, Demaricus, Dean Demaricus, and we received full reimbursement for them. The next 2 recruits, which was Officer Law and Officer Bishop, this would be applicable to. And what it is that in the past, the Training and Standards Bureau directly reimbursed College of DuPage Suburban Law Enforcement Academy. And they no longer do that, but what they would do was, if the municipality submitted a request for reimbursement, they would consider those based upon need. So there was no guarantee on how much we may receive, if anything at all. Now, we have not yet been invoiced for officer, law, or bishop's attendance at the academy. And with not having an invoice, we haven't submitted it. We certainly will, but I don't know what, if anything, we will receive. However, we did have 2 of our officers go to the College of DuPage Suburban Law Enforcement Academy as class supervisors, where they were there for the entire academy supervising recruits. And this was an excellent opportunity, and both of these people are now sergeants, to give them supervisory experience as far as documentation, performance evaluation, mentoring, and coaching of these recruits. And for each one of these recruits, we got a $2,200 credit, which could be used towards training at the academy. And what we have been using it for is our quarterly firearms qualification shoots, where we had to pay a fee to use the range. And we can apply that once there is an invoice submitted, and whatever balance there may be, we can draw upon that reimbursement fund to supplement that. So I don't know if there's any other questions with that. I did also notify and put in the weekly report that we received from Lexipol a bronze award for policy formulation, management, and training of our police officers. And I think this is important to comment on, especially in light of the fact that with the new developments going up in Warrenville, I think this is something that may be attractive to new residents, to see that we're on the cutting edge of not only formulating our policies, but going forward and making sure that there's training. And that's done by our daily training bulletins, which is performed by every officer every day they're working in the squad cars via their mobile data terminals or their computers. Again, next year we'll shoot for silver, and then the year after that, gold. But this is our first year that we received that award, and we're very happy. And again, I think it speaks well to the investment that the city council has made in the police department with this. And as noted, we had Officer McCurris and Sergeant Komar recognized for what they assisted Winfield Police Department with. And in the one incident particularly, it was Officer McCurris using photographic skills, which she obtained, again, through the benefit of the city council allocating funds to have her trained as a high-level forensic evidence technician. This includes a lot of training, and it's things, it's photography, it's casting, where you'll go in and cast tire tracks and footwear impressions. It's recovering tool mark impressions. It's latent fingerprint identification. So a tremendous amount of time has been invested in this officer to make sure she's on the cutting edge of being a highly qualified, well-trained evidence technician, and she is. And this is supplemented by regular use of these skills through the Metropolitan Enforcement Task Force. So again, we're very proud of that. And then again, to show how and my philosophy has always been, you have to have some unobligated time when you're out there on the street. You can't be running call to call to call. And Officer Seaman demonstrated that at about 1:30 in the morning, while utilizing some of this unoccupied time. He's going through a neighborhood. He sees something that looks out of place to him, and it's an open garage door. He goes in, checks the premises, secures the garage, and then is able to contact the resident to make sure that no crime was committed. And then just lastly, the well wish for our safety from a resident that I believe in his wife or significant other for the police department. So that's all I have, Chairman.
Thank you. And it's always very nice to hear from Dave Shar, especially about something good like this. So fine, former Warrenville police officer who's now in charge in Winfield. And I'm glad he's finding good things to write us about. If there are any comments, I know that Alderman Davalos already wanted to make comments about this. If there's anybody else who wants to speak up about the commendations, please feel free. Alderman Widener.
Yeah, congratulations, Chief. I just have a quick question about the training modules that they go through at the beginning of every shift. Could you go into a little detail about what those and maybe just a couple ideas of what the topics of training might be?
Sure. These are randomly selected and what's called our DTBs, or daily training bulletins. When they log into their mobile data terminals, they're given a scenario, and it's what we call our high risk, low frequency type incidents. And this could be involved dealing with mentally disturbed individuals, police pursuit driving, detention of juvenile suspects, things like positional asphyxiation and use of force. And the scenario will be given, and then there will be several questions that will be asked of the officer. And if they get their answers, recorded and a score given to them. If they get a wrong answer, then it is reviewed about what the policy topic is, what the appropriate answer would be, and why that appropriate response would be the correct one for this particular scenario. So what we're doing is we're looking at our most critical type of policies that would have the highest liability exposure for the city and the police officer, and then asking them to make a choice about the correct direction to handle that incident. And if there is a mistake made, there would be remediation, and their scores are saved. So in the event that there's any type of civil action filed, we can always go back and we can recall the amount of times that this officer was trained in a particular topic.
Great, thank you. Just one quick follow-up. Are these auto-generated, or are these coming from a specific member of the Warrenville Police Department who devised the training questions and provided the quiz?
No, we reviewed all the policies that Lexipol constructed for our department, and when appropriate, we would make certain tweaks where we had to, depending on the number of officers we had, et cetera, and our command structure. Lexipol then follows all court decisions, whether it be federal or state, and modifies the policy to adhere to what those court decisions would be, so that we have the latest constructed policy, and then they're randomly generated by Lexipol through their computers.
Great, sounds very thorough, and once again, congratulations on the award, and congratulate all the members of your department too.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Chief. If anybody else has anything. All right, if not, I think we've reached the end of our agenda, and all we need is a motion to adjourn.
Alderman Anderson, motion to adjourn.
Second, Alderman Christian.
Thank you. We have a motion, we have a second. Can we have a roll call?
Alderman Anderson?
Aye.
Alderman Ashaw?
Aye.
Alderman Berry?
Aye.
Alderman Davalos?
Aye.
Alderman Goodman?
You broke up. What did you say, Goodman?
Yes.
Yes, aye.
Alderman Kerschel.
Aye.
Alderman Widener.
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. We are adjourned.
Thank you, Chairman.